Hello, I'm Harry Glorikian. Welcome to the Harry Glorikian Show, the interview podcast that explores how technology is changing everything we know about healthcare. Artificial intelligence, big data, predictive analytics. In fields like these, breakthroughs are happening much faster than most people realize. If you want to be proactive about your own healthcare and the healthcare of your loved ones, you'll need to learn some of these new tips and techniques of how medicine is changing and how you can take advantage of all the new options. Explaining this approaching world is the mission of the new book, The Future You. It's also our theme here on the show, where we bring you the conversations with innovators, caregivers, and patient advocates who are transforming the healthcare system and working to push it in positive directions. Healthcare is one of those areas where more data is almost always better. And I talk a lot on the show about how data is helping doctors and patients make smarter decisions. But a lot of the data we'd like to have is still stuck in those arcane electronic health record systems, or EHRs, that medical practices or hospital systems use to track their patients. These systems tend to be closed, proprietary, user-unfriendly, and incompatible with one another. And I haven't been shy here on the show about my opinion that the chaotic state of EHR technology is holding back innovation across the healthcare market. That's why I'm always interested in talking with companies that are working to make EHR data more useful. And today, I have a pair of guests from a company called Verana Health that's trying to do just that. The company recently brought in $150 million in new venture capital funding to help scale up its data services, which currently focus on the subspecialties of ophthalmology, neurology, and urology. Verana takes data on patients in these fields, cleans it up, analyzes it, and pulls out insights that could be useful both for clinicians who want to increase the quality of the care they're providing and for pharmaceutical companies who need new ways to measure the effectiveness of their drugs and better ways to find patients for clinical trials. Here to explain more about all of that are Verana CEO, Sujay Jadhav, as well as its Senior Vice President of Clinical and Scientific Solutions, Shrujal Baxi. If you're a longtime listener, you might remember that we had Shrujal on the show once before, back in 2018, when she talked about her previous company, Flatiron Health. We're glad to welcome her back. Now, on to the show. Sujay, welcome to the show, and Shrujal, welcome back to the show. Now that you're at a different place, it's great to have you both here.
Yeah. Thanks, Harry.
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here as well. Thanks.
So, I want to ask you guys, like, if one or both of you can describe Verana's, reason for existing at least a high level, and what the unmet need in the world of patient care or drug development are you meeting?
Yeah, happy to jump in, and Shrujal, you can sort of add in sort of the healthcare sort of goals that we have as well. But in essence, what Verana is all about, we have an exclusive real-world data network focused on 3 therapeutic areas: ophthalmology, neurology, and urology. And in essence, what we are doing is we're helping provide insights to providers in helping improve quality of care, helping improve their participation in clinical trials, and also provide insights to life sciences companies across the overall drug life cycle, all the way from study design, helping out in trial recruitment, to helping them out in launching drugs, commercializing drugs, so they can overall improve the quality of care, in a more holistic fashion. The crux of how we're going about doing it, in essence, is accessing EHR data, and eventually de-identifying it to provide these particular insights. In high level, there's data which is very, very structured, and there's data which is unstructured, And there's a sort of a increased focus on the unstructured data, because I would say that's probably where there is the largest opportunity out there to provide insights across that overall value chain.
Yeah, I know. I know the area well, but I want to sort of spend a moment on the origin story of Verana Health, and I'm assuming it has something to do with the relationship between Verana and the American Academy of Ophthalmology, since I think it's the Academy's CEO, David Park, is also a co-founder and executive chairman on Verana. You also have partnerships with the American Academy of Neurology and the American Urological Society. So it seems like these, and it's funny because I think of these associations as publishing journals or, organizing conferences or maybe, having representation in Washington, but it seems like you guys were a spin-off or a piece that came out of at least the American Academy of Ophthalmology. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, really, Verana was founded on, sort of the ophthalmology registry, in essence. And, the ophthalmology registry, probably one of the leading registries in terms of the way that, well, first of all, participation, from the specialists. I think it's close to 70% of ophthalmologists are part of the registry. But they're one of the leaders in terms of taking the actual data from the ophthalmologists, and they were actually processing that particular data via a third party out there to help provide insights, to predominantly the ophthalmologists out there, but eventually to provide insights to help further research. And so Verana was really founded on sort of the ophthalmology registry. They decided to spin out that capability as an independent company, then bring in some external investors, sort of investors which are very committed to digital health. Brooke Byers from Kleiner Perkins, Google Ventures, and they funded the separate entity. And then ultimately the goal was to take that data capability that they have, and then help normalize it and provide more insights around it to further the overall drug life cycle. And then, along the way, other societies saw the progress that we're making, and decided to also, partner with Verana, starting with the Neurology Society and then urology as well.
Now, just so like for the listeners, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think and because I like to give credit where credit is due, right? Is a lot of these, medical associations began to gather a lot more data and build some giant databases. But I think that was driven by the, CMS or, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services sort of setting up this merit-based incentive payment system and sort of driving this. So it's sort of like, I always like to give government credit when they actually do something right, but they actually put some money behind this to encourage this sort of activity, which has resulted in this sort of data set that's now available for us to really glean some insights for patients.
I mean, I think when we look back, sort of the development of the electronic health record is what set this off. And that was also a government initiative, right? To really move us all from paper charts into electronic health records. And then sort of the potential that comes from that. If we think about the brilliance of these registries, they were smart enough to start collecting the data early on and, sort of answering your first two questions from a medical perspective, like what is Verana here to do? We're here to help transform that data that's available in the electronic health record, sort of generated as part of regular care, and get all of the insights we can in healthcare, the way that data is generating insights in every other industry out there. But there is a particular sensitivity in healthcare, de-identification, making sure we're taking care and responsibility of that process, which makes sort of what Verana is doing a little bit different than what might be happening out there. But when you think about why there's so much excitement around what we're doing, it's that we're actually going to do it from a technological standpoint. So the scale at which we're hoping to do it should drive insights like we haven't been able to do with sort of the first pass at getting value from the EHR, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you've listened to many of my shows, I have a big pet peeve with the normal EHR system. I've gone so far to say, if anything breaks healthcare because of its inability to change, is this arcane, our counting system that got morphed into, quote, we're going to manage patients. But you mentioned from a physician's perspective is what kind of data do these databases that you have access to contain that's important or valuable for assessing quality of care, let's say?
It spans the gambit, right? Because data is just that. It's what we do is we transform it into a structured format that can be analyzed. But what you use it for is really, it's limitless, right? Do we want to look at how to optimize how patients are seen? Who sees those patients? How do we get them into a clinical trial? How do we get trials set up at a practicing site that happens to be seeing a lot of patients of a particular disease subtype? Are we starting to pick up patterns in how new medications are released into routine care that have been tried in clinical trials? Can we pick up safety signals in the real world that you can never capture when you only have a small clinical trial of 200 patients? But when you launch that drug at a larger cohort, what is actually happening in the real world? All of that is possible once you figure out how to transform all the information that's entered into the EHR into analyzable formats. And so, it's interesting because Sujay gave all the real use cases, but in my mind, what we're doing is the technology, which is how are we going to do this in a sort of scalable way? So as the data is coming in, we can take it and output structured data that can then be used for analyses. And the better we get at that transformation step, the faster and the more reliable that is, that really sort of unlocks what we can do with the data. In my mind,
it's funny.
At least.
Yeah, it's funny. You're covering like, I don't know, half a dozen podcasts I think I've did with various companies that are doing different parts of this. But I mean, I've looked at the company's literature, and you put a lot of emphasis on what's called real world data. And this is a topic, I've covered on the show many times. Late last year, I did an interview with Jeff Elton from Concert AI, where they collect post-approval data and help improve decision-making inside drug companies. So I want to ask you first, what do the folks at Verana have in mind when they talk about real-world data? Does it basically mean any data collected outside of the context of a clinical trial, or?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, I know the real-world data terminology has different types of descriptions, but fundamentally, we look at it, generally any observational data, is sort of what we categorize as real world data and what we are focused on from a high level perspective. And, what we see within the EHR, there's a lot of that data available there. And, in essence, what we are doing is accessing it, extracting it, normalizing it, and then providing, different levels of insights depending on the different types of use cases, which are important to improve, quality of care at the provider level there, and also help further research within the life sciences arena as well. So, that's high level the way we look at it. One of the things, in order to finish up sort of or complete the overall patient journey and have a holistic perspective is we need to, also match that up with other types of data there. And so, claims data, for example, at times has better longitudinal elements to it as well. So, we spend a lot of effort and work there doing matching there, as well. We're bringing in, other types of data forms and imaging data, and, as well. So, while we are very focused on the EHR data there, we are actively, complementing it with other types of data sources to get a more holistic picture there. But, I would say that, a lot of companies out there have been doing a really good job of, accessing this data from a more structured format perspective, right? And one of the things that I've seen, and this is more of a high level comment, is when you look at some of the structured data, there can be an element of sort of extra latency in terms of getting that information to make certain decisions. So decisions such as, hey, for a particular clinical trial, what are the right patients that you should target, et cetera. And so, what we are, really focused on is the unstructured data, the physician notes, and then leveraging sort of AI techniques there to provide those signals, so that allows us to, in a close to real-time basis, target, particular patients, which could be a better fit for a particular trial versus historical means, which have been a little bit more sort of delayed in terms of getting those data inputs.
So, this begs the question before we jump into the product itself is, do you guys have like an opinion on why the medical establishment has not been so great at, tracking or analyzing real world data up till now? I mean, has it been, I doubt it's lack of interest. It's probably more like technical limitations is my guess, or maybe lack of interoperability, or all of the above.
I mean, since I was last time I was here, a lot has happened in the real world data space. To start with, and I think we talked about this last time, which is real world data has been here forever, right? Clinicians have been doing chart reviews and publishing case series. That's all real world data. It's taking a look at what happens in the routine care of patients, pulling it out and analyzing it in order to deliver insights. I think what the electronic health record did, or what we believed it would do, is allow us to do that type of work at a scale that we couldn't do it before. The second thing I think that real world data is now considered potentially useful for that it wasn't previously is causation, and the analytic ability to actually make linkage between input and output in a way that isn't just hypothesis generating. And, the regulators are really sort of driving the space with the guidances that are coming out, and really framing for companies like ours how we should be thinking about data and the data quality, and sort of where this data could be used. So there's sort of two parts, right? One is, how do we generate it in real time at scale so that we can understand important questions? And then the other is the part that I think Sujay really sort of leaned in on, which is the entirety of a patient's journey. And this is a very patient-centric problem. It isn't captured in a single EHR. So how do we bring together all the different components of a patient's journey such that we get the complete picture, the genetics, the imaging, the multiple different providers, the claims for what was paid for, right? And so it's kind of an exciting time in the sense that we've sort of gotten to second base, maybe. We figured out how to get all the data. Now we're figuring out how to transform the data. Now we're going to figure out how to link the data. In the meantime, in parallel, we're figuring out how to analyze observational data. And a company like Verana is sort of really well poised to do those things because of all the different components and the partners that we have to do that, I think, at least.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Shrujal said there. And I think it's sort of inherent in sort of your question around the technology has the technology been there before, et cetera? I think to a certain extent it has. But it has been evolving, and obviously in the last decade with sort of AI techniques, natural language processing techniques, they've started to mature and come at scale. But one of the key things around our industry is patient privacy, right? And so we have the technology, and it's been leveraged in a lot of other different industries. But the stakes are very, very high here because of protecting, patient data overall. And so, working through how can you access this data at scale and ensure and make sure that, you're adhering to the patient privacy there has taken a little bit longer to do. But now we have it currently right now. We have a lot of techniques on the de-identified realm where we can now leverage that to address that particular point. And I think, it's an exciting time right now, which is, we now have the tools to do this at scale, but, ensure that, we're keeping patient privacy intact as well.
Can I add one thing to that before you ask your next question? Yeah. I was going to say that, but we also have a responsibility on the end of that spectrum, which is we have to have high quality data. So we need to protect the patient's privacy. We need to be very responsible with the data, but we also have to be very responsible with how the data is generated, such that we don't end up with conclusions that are harmful. Like the integrity of the data throughout that process needs to be maintained, because people are going to action on the output of our analyses using the data that we're generating. And so that's an incredible responsibility that I think we take on, and sort of critical to how we think about what we do. It's not just data, it's data that's generated to make decisions in healthcare that impacts patients very directly.
Yep, absolutely. So, I think this is maybe a good segue or opportunity. Like, what have you guys actually built? Because we've been talking around it. Is like, what is, I think it's called the Verana Health Data Engine, if I've got it right. And, tell me a little bit about the product. And you mentioned natural language processing and machine learning. And so how does that fit? At what point and where does it fit? And I'm sure there's a few people who are gonna listen closely at this part because they're interested in this stuff. Some others may not listen as closely, but if you could tell me a little bit about the product, that would be great for everybody listening.
Sure, absolutely. So, in essence, what we have is we do have a real world data network where we access 20,000 providers. We have 90 million data identified patients currently, and it's growing at a good clip currently right now. And what we do is we take that data, we ingest the data, we normalize it and curate it to provide insights to providers to improve quality and participate in trials, and then also to the life sciences community as well, to help further research, broadly speaking. There, sort of our technology platform is called VeraQ. We released it last year. In essence, is sort of the secret sauce around ingesting it and normalizing, curating the data. And then once we do that, then what we do is we deliver it in what we call de-identified data modules, called Q data modules, which are aligned according to the therapeutic areas in certain disease states. And so what we do is, within each of the 3 therapeutic areas, we release on a quarterly basis different disease modules, Q data modules there. And then that helps serve up a lot of insights that life sciences companies can use across different areas. So anything from helping out in trial design. We've worked with a lot of large pharma companies around helping improve sort of how they target particular patients out there by leveraging these de-identified Q data modules, to helping out on recruitment, as well, in terms of working through what are the right providers they should target, which have that patient population that fit the trial, to eventually seeing when you actually launch the drug, how the use is occurring out there in the marketplace, how they can better target it to improve the value of the particular drug they have there as well. And we eventually serve that up in sort of application modules across that overall drug life cycle. So, to summarize, our platform is VeraQ. We then serve it up in these Q data modules, and then we deliver it in these solution sets, which are provider facing and also life sciences facing.
So if you had to pick, go ahead.
I was going to say something that's really unique about Verana and shouldn't be glossed over is the fact that so many different EHRs are out there, and they're created differently, and they are, subspecialized to the provider with bells and whistles that each different practice pays for. And to take all of that disparate information and ingest it and harmonize it such that the output are, variables that can be generated at a scalable fashion across millions of charts, and then use that for analysis. I mean, Sujay made it sound really good and clean, but that's actually that's a lot of work for anyone who's ever touched an EHR and tried to get value out of the data that's entered. It's a feat. And I think that engine, now that it's built, is sort of poised to take in and give out, right? That was the infrastructure build. That was 2021. And 2022 is the data that's going to come out as he was describing. But I just want to, and I'm particularly passionate about this because I work now at different companies that think about this, and that particular part of harmonization from the starting point that are so many different places is really, I think, a technological advancement.
Yeah, I was going to actually, I was going to ask a question first, and then I was actually going to, we talk about major, EHR systems sold to hospitals, on this show a lot, and the interoperability, and it's just, oh my God, it's a mess, right? And I hear it from patients too, right? I had someone call me the other day and they were like, I don't want to say they were chewing my ear off, but they were unhappy, and they were like, just said, and it was a friend of mine who had gone into a hospital, and he goes, I'm sure you know all this. I'm like, yes, I know all this, but hearing it from somebody is interesting. It sounds like, I mean, you guys are harmonizing, or correct me if I'm wrong, like, at least from what I heard, ophthalmology, neurology, and urology. And so, if you were able to give that back to the physician, I think that would be hugely of value as a physician, assuming that it's simple for them to interact with, and they don't need a degree in computer science, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's exactly what we are also focused on. I mean, sort of part of sort of the way we are approaching this opportunity is sort of twofold. Number one, working with the providers, helping improve that they can provide care, and we're very committed to that. The way we're committed to that is you brought up sort of MIPS quality reporting, which is important for CMS submissions, and we actually have a particular solution that is provider facing, which allows them to work through sort of their quality scores, understand how they're doing overall in terms of the overall quality of care from a high level perspective. In addition to that, we're also allowing them to access sort of their patients data to help improve how they can participate in clinical trials. And we understand that their bandwidth is very, very constrained. They need to focus on care. And folks like myself and Shrujal, we've been doing this for a couple of decades as well, and spend a lot of time working with physicians out there. And so we understand that making this user friendly, allowing them to come in and out as quickly as possible to get the insight they do is extremely important. And that's sort of a key part of what we are focused on as a company. And we're committed to helping improve quality of care by taking on sort of this MIPS reporting obligation as part of sort of our overall business model as well. But through that particular process, we obviously have access to the data. We then de-identify it, and then we can provide the next generation of insights to the life sciences industry, which is very, very compelling across the board. And it's very, very interesting that I've been doing this for 20 years plus, and I still feel we're just barely scratching the surface in how we leverage this particular data. And so there's definitely a lot of work that we are doing, leveraging natural language processing techniques to allow us to do this at particular scale. And that's sort of core for us helping to deliver on this sort of next level of opportunity that we see to help improve care across the overall value chain.
So do one of you or both of you have your favorite case study that highlights the different strengths of the system that you can sort of, put it into context for someone?
Sujay, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, from my perspective, we're providing a lot of insights, as I mentioned, across sort of the overall drug life cycle. The area which got me the most excited, around Verana is really on the trial side of the house, in essence. And so, we do a lot of work around helping out in trial design, right? But the areas that we're starting to see sort of the biggest next level value that we're providing is really on the recruitment side of the house. And as you know, recruitment is being a big pain point in the industry at large. I think a lot of companies are out there which are helping, work through and target the right sites, help target the right, PIs, providers, which, have the actual patients there. But that final mile of helping out do the actual recruitment is something which is very difficult to do. The biggest influencer in recruitment is the physician. And via sort of the solutions that we're providing around our quality reporting side as well, Halsea, we feel at least we have some bandwidth there with the physician, and we want to leverage that to improve recruitment. So, we've done a number of projects in the recruitment side, particularly in the rare disease area. Is an area that we've done a lot of work there, because historically the way it is, the process has been, which is, hey, these are the particular, physicians out there which have participated in historical trials, et cetera. Let's just target them as well. And it's more around historically which providers have participated in trials. But what we're doing is that we're doing it from the data level up there. And so, what we did with a large pharma company out there in a particular rare disease area there is we actually identified a number of patients with actual providers which have never participated in trials before. And so we yielded a set of patients which probably they never would have gotten via the normal mechanisms out there. And I would say the types of improvements we're starting to see in the trial side is north of 30% efficiency improvements in the trial process overall. And if you extrapolate that, to how much they spend in clinical trials, that's tens of millions of dollars of cost savings that you can take out of the chain. So, that's probably the area where I've seen a lot of value that we're provided with this particular data. I don't know, Shrujal, you have any other examples?
Mine is not nearly as grandiose, but it's really sort of brings home why data is important. So recently we ran an analysis with the American Urologic Association, just as a sort of look at how the data can show us what's happening. And it's going to come out in their spring, newsletter that they send to all their members. And we partnered with one of their academic collaborators, and we just asked a question about uptake of routine bone density scans for patients with prostate cancer who are going to go on to hormonal therapy for about 6 months to a year. And that's been a quality measure that they've been tracking as an organization, because it's a place for improvement for urology overall. And we were just curious, sort of in our data, what does that look like, right? And so perfect use, create data, analyze data. What we found is that the uptick, the uptake of this particular recommendation over time has steadily increased. But lo and behold, COVID hit. People didn't stop getting prostate cancer, but they did stop doing screening for bone density. And we know that if you don't look for bone density, you're not going to treat low bone density. And therefore, these patients are going to be at risk for fractures, which are, in a certain population, just devastating. And so I sort of am stealing the thunder of the snapshot, so please forgive me, AUA. But the takeaway here is that there is something we can now do. Let's go back to those patients that we diagnosed in 2020, and let's make sure that all those patients get bone density scans. And if we can prevent even one fracture, then this data has served its purpose directly to the patients, right? Yeah. And so that's just a glimpse of what we can do with the data. And there's so many opportunities like that to directly impact patient outcomes if we can just figure out what questions to ask and then how to disseminate that information. So
Yeah,
not quite as big and grandiose, but really tactical and tangible, I think.
Yeah, no. I mean, I once you have the data, my brain goes in,
All these different places.
10 different directions of what can I do with it, which is why I like investing in the space, because it's, if you've really got access to the right quality data and you can actually interrogate it, you're not just a one-trick pony, right? There's different and one of the things that I was thinking of is, with all the data you've got, couldn't you create like really optimized digital twins that might be able to also be used in a trial? And that's one of the first things that popped into my head. But Shrujal, last time we talked, you were head of clinical science at Flatiron. And I think, if I got it correctly, your title now is Senior Vice President of Clinical and Scientific Solutions. So what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the fact that clinical and science are in both the titles sort of tells you that in many ways, my role at a company like Flatiron or my role at a company like Verana is not all that different, right? It's to make sure that we are bringing through the perspective of the clinician, who is fundamentally at the heart of the documentation that's happening, and that we're translating that when we partner with our technology colleagues to translate how that data is going to be transformed so that we don't lose the meaning of the information. As a scientist or an outcomes researcher, I was a consumer. I would interrogate databases that were generated like this. And so I can put my outcomes or my health services research hat on, my clinician hat on. What questions do I need answered? And what does the data need to look like? So I sort of sit in many ways at the start and at the finish and help partner along the way with our cross-functional colleagues who do really the bulk of the work. Like I think it's such the strength of these companies is how collaborative they are. The challenge of these companies is how many people have to work together and communicate and say the right words and the same words to mean the same things. And so the title sounds a little different, but in many ways, I feel like my role is to preserve the voice of the provider and therefore indirectly the patient in everything that we're doing. The other piece that I think the title seems bigger at Verana, but what it's actually, I think, expanded my scope into is to understand where engineering and data science and that AI ML component of the transformation can really take us. I think technology enabled abstraction is one thing, but I think actually applying technology to extract the data is a whole nother level of complexity and scale. But once built, it's sort of a receptor just waiting for new data sources to come through, because you can take 10 EHRs, 12 EHRs, 100 EHRs. If you've built the pipeline and you've built that MLAI to put on top of it, the output should come sort of instantaneously. And so I say that with a wink almost to Sujay, because I know it's a lot harder than that. I've learned. But ultimately, that's what Verana is building towards. And so the scope of my work and how I think has changed just slightly.
Well, it sounds like a critical piece of the puzzle to make sure that, everything is translated correctly and everything is understood correctly, et cetera. So I think it's a valuable position. They might need to clone you though, because I feel like there's a lot going on there.
I feel like there's a lot going on.
Yeah. No, there definitely is. I mean, and we have sort of a network of medical professionals that we leverage, across all three therapeutic areas, and that's really, part of sort of our overall process, right? But, I think Shrujal described it very, very clearly, but, ultimately, what we're trying to get out of sort of Shrujal and the group is sort of how to, medically inform the overall process that we're doing right now and make it relevant and practical to truly provide insights to the clinician, right, at the end of the day there. And so, there's a pragmatic element to sort of her and the involvement in the overall process, because technology can only take you so far. But to get that sort of final pragmatic element to that particular therapeutic area, requires a medical professional.
Yeah, and I think one of the most challenging things is how to present it, and like you said, I mean, real time that's a whole other dynamic to tackle that people don't understand.
Yeah.
But you guys just had some fantastic news. I believe recently a Series E venture round brought in, I think it was 150 million, if I remember the number correctly, from J&J Innovation, as well as existing investors like Google Ventures. I mean, first of all, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's a
Thank you.
pretty good sized round. Can you fill us in on, like, okay, somebody just handed you $150 million check. What are you going to do?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Firstly, where the $150 million raise is a significant raise, and we're very fortunate that it's comes from a diversified set of digital health investors, broadly speaking, combination of growth investors, innovation funds from life sciences companies, as well as academia as well. And so I think it's a good cross-section mix that we have. Fundamentally, a number of investors which are very committed to digital health overall, and will allow us to sort of accelerate the business as we take it to sort of the next level. In a lot of ways, I think it's sort of recognition of where Verana is, and we've, I think, done a really good job of building out our data technology platform. We are now commercializing the business very, very well. In terms of, what we're going to do with the capital, in essence, it's fuel for growth. We've anchored on a really good business model currently right now. And what we are going to leverage the money for is to help execute on our existing sustainable product strategy, which is coupled by premium services on a solid data foundation. And there's sort of three areas that we're going to focus on. The first one is on the provider side of the house. There, we already have an existing set of solutions in the quality area, in the clinical trial area. And we're going to further those particular solutions, take them to the next level to make it easier for physicians and providers to do their job. The second area that we're going to be investing in even more is on the life sciences solution side there as well. And so both, we have a set of trial solutions there. We have what we call data as a service solution set, which allows these life sciences companies to access the curated data in a very easy fashion. So it allows them to provide, different levels of insights that they feel are important, as well. And then, the third area is just furthering sort of expanding sort of the data that we have currently right now. I think we've got a really good critical mass right now with 90 million de-identified patients, 20,000 plus providers there. We're going to continue to increase that across our three therapeutic areas. But, bring it, move into other types of data sources. I think imaging is one, we're going to invest in a big way. I think that can really, truly, help complete the picture. Genetic information also is something that we're inserting into the mix as well. And, bringing in, EHR data, bringing in, claims data, bringing in imaging, genetic data, is a complex, equation, so to speak there. And
to say the least, yeah.
It is. And sort of doing that in a thoughtful way, doing it in a way which is scalable, takes a lot of effort. And that's where, we're going to be investing a lot of these funds to make that happen. And, we're well on the way to actually doing this. And so, a lot of the money is in essence just executing on the current strategy.
So, you were CEO of I think it was Gobalto that you sold to Oracle, right?
Yeah.
before that, I think you were at something called Model N. I was going back in my notes, right?
Yep.
Like now you're back at a startup, right? After Oracle, and why do startups in an area like big data and AI understand something in healthcare that what I look at is the giants don't? Like what can startups accomplish that these, we've seen many forays of the big guys into healthcare, dismal failures. What do the startups understand that the giants don't, and what can they accomplish that the giants can't?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think when you look at sort of my background, I've been involved in the first company was focused on the commercial side, second company on the clinical trial side. So in a lot of ways, I look at Verana sort of a more holistic perspective on what has been the culmination of sort of 20 years in terms of my work experience overall. But throughout the experiences that I've had, I've joined companies at the early, I would say, ideation stage and helped productize and commercialize them, and that's been sort of a consistent theme. At Model N, we sort of did that, focusing on a set of solutions which help life sciences companies, optimize pricing. At Cobalto, it was helping automate the early part of the clinical trial process. But again, it was all around productization and commercialization. I would say the key thing that companies early stage can do, which the big companies can't do, is just agility and speed. To take take the technology and apply it to sort of these key sort of industry business problems out there. And there's something inherent around startups, around sort of the passion from a people perspective. There's something around the speed at which you can make decisions, which you cannot get at large companies at all. And so while people feel that tech companies get bigger and broader over time, the intangible is sort of the people element of it as well, and the ability to make decisions. And that's why I think when you look at sort of the next generation of if you call it digital health companies out there, they're going to be very, very data centric. And they're going to come from these early stage companies purely because they have the right people and the passion and the speed to adopt that technology and apply it to these problems, which the big companies can't.
Well, it's been great having you both here. Love talking about this stuff, as you can tell. And I wish you guys incredible luck, because I keep getting older, and I think I'm going to become, at some point you become more of a patient. So the more that this advances, the better my health and wellness will become. And I look forward to maybe having you guys in the future and seeing the evolution of where this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Harry. Enjoyed talking.
Thank you.
Thanks.